Hi, I'm Sam Sorbo. You've heard me talk about Mike Lindell, who I adore. You know, he's the inventor of My Pillow, and how that pillow has given me a good night's sleep that I need. In fact, I never knew how good I could sleep before I had my Pillow. Mike continues to roll out new offers on his products, and the latest one is on his towel sets. Towels aren't something you think about often. I never knew what I was missing until I tried the towels just last year. Now, you have all helped build My Pillow into the incredible company that it is today, and you've trusted Mike Lindell to give you a great night's sleep. Mike's now changing the game with his 6-piece towel set. The set's made with USA cotton, making it extremely absorbent, and yet still providing that soft feel you look for in a towel. The set comes with 2 bath, 2 hand towels, and 2 washcloths, typically retailing for $109.99. But for a limited time, you can get this set for the low price of $39.99. And that's using promo code Sam Sorbo. So remember, all My Pillow products come with a 60-day money-back guarantee. You just go to mypillow.com, click on the radio listener specials to get this insanely low price of $39.99 on the towel set. You'll find deep discounts on other My Pillow products as well. So enter promo code Sam Sorbo, or you can call 800-625-5983. That's 800-625-5983 for these great radio specials. Welcome back to the Sam Sorbo Show. I'm Sam Sorbo. I'm joined now by a special guest. This is a gal who I just met, but I've known about her for a long time, and you probably have heard of her also. KrisAnn Hall is a constitutional attorney. She's also a former state prosecutor, an author, an educator. She's the host of the KrisAnn Hall Show, and she's the founder of Liberty First Society. She actually trains legislators and law enforcement and everyday patriots how to keep their oaths and defend their rights. She actually trains them on their rights as well, because as we know, our education system is not eager for people to know their rights. Why? I can't imagine why the government wouldn't want people to know their rights. KrisAnn, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. If we had a better foundation, it's sort of ironic. It's almost a negative feedback circle. But if we had a better foundation in education, we would understand automatically why government wouldn't want to teach people about their rights. And we would understand why we as a people don't want government in charge of education and training up the American future. I mean, from just simply a logical, critical thinking perspective, you have to understand that government must teach that it is your provider, it is your protector, so that it becomes your master. And so education should be something that is left to the parents, left to the immediate community, and even left to the church.
Yeah. So you think I'm being obtuse when I make my joke that, oh, the government should want every. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
I know it's a joke, but here's the thing. You say it tongue in cheek. I travel all over the country. I've averaged 260 classes in over 22 states for 7 years straight before all the lockdowns came. And I'll tell you, even in our conservative circles, a lot of people don't understand why government shouldn't be in the education business.
So let me ask you this, because I'm wrestling with this of late. I speak to groups of conservatives, mm-hmm. and I convince them with my 3-step process why schools are not the best place for children to learn, and that our schools are basically at this point fundamentally broke. Well, they're fundamentally flawed. They're currently terribly broken also. And so we really need to completely abandon, in a sense, our school system and raise our children. If we want them to be conservatives and if we want them to be godly, we need to take them out of that system. And the parents go along, and they're totally on board. They agree with me. And then they'll come up to me after my presentation and say, we really loved what you had to say. It makes the perfect sense. We're so glad, that you're saying this. More power to you. And I say, oh, that's awesome. Do you have kids? Yes. And your kids are homeschooled? And they're like, no, our son goes to public school, but it's a great school. And I'm just like, do you not see the disconnect? Like there's an entire, and I wonder if that is also a product of our education system, that we are so unwilling. Really, it just boils down to being unwilling to consider evidence and synthesize it, analyze it, synthesize it for an understanding. What do you think?
I think there's actually several issues that are involved there by design. Okay. Like I said, I teach all over the country. I hear the same thing. We know the public schools are bad, but not my school. And so what that is a complete lack of understanding of, number one, the origin and intent of the public schools, and the fact that the public schools all teach the same thing. And so you might have good Christian teachers in your public school, but they're slaves to the curriculum. And if I could offer just a little bit of maybe suggestion, is that the public school system is not broken. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do.
Yes.
The public school system was designed in the 1800s, following the teachings of psychologists, experimental psychologists from the Munich School, to create laboratories of education to make the population docile, to make the population obedient, to bring about the one world government, and to create socialists, communists through the education process. And what's interesting is they didn't begin with the kindergartners. They began with the colleges, with the PhD programs, and move their way down, because they knew if they could take over the avenues that create the textbooks, then train up the teachers in the textbooks, and then the teachers will teach the textbooks, everything will fall into place. So it's not a matter of, oh, well, not my school. Yes, your school, every school. I don't care who your teachers are. Every school was designed since the mid 1800s to bring about the society that we have today. And they even published that their purpose was to create a docile, yielding society. So the number two answer to your question is, why don't they want to change? Because they've been taught not to change. They've been taught to enjoy and to cling to comfort more than their rights.
They've been taught to cling to comfort. And in fact, this was an idea that came up the other day when I was talking about this, is people don't want to be disturbed from their comfort.
Right.
It's not that, it's partly that they're unwilling to change. People don't like change. Change is difficult, right. All of that. But it's also that they're so comfortable and they don't want to be challenged in that comfort that they're enjoying.
Well, that's why Thomas Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence that people will suffer evil as long as evil is sufferable, but after a long train of abuses and usurpations. And that's why we're starting to see a change now, because the violation of our rights and the oppressive nature of our extremely overreaching governments is finally pushing people to a place where evil is no longer sufferable. When I teach, and I've been studying this for a while now, I've been teaching now for 11 years all across the country, I have seen the methodology of the oppressors, those who are changing government into rulers instead of people ruling over government. And it's been happening a really long time. As a matter of fact, we stopped teaching the Constitution and the proper role of government in its rightful form in 1833. And so we have been on a long train. We have been traveling this road. It just didn't, from a lot of people, they think it just happened overnight. It just happened with the
Oh
Obama
yeah, no,
administration. It's not true.
now the sex education is off the rails, but before it was just fine. And you're like, no,
Yeah.
before was just the gateway to get us here.
Well, sex education was implemented in the American education system by design, right at the end of World War II. There was a treatise put out by the department, the General Education Board back then is what they were called.
Right.
And part of their manifesto was to teach sex education in the classroom. The other part of their manifesto was to get parents out of the education business, to get education out of the local cultural, local community business. And they said, without seemingly doing so. So we want to move parents out. We want to move the local control out in a way that the people don't even notice it's happening.
Right. And they've been very successful. And then most recently, because of COVID, parents are waking up and seeing that their children are being taught things that they really despise, not that they just disagree with a little bit or that they think that maybe they can fix later, but this is real stuff that they're not going to be able to undo, basically.
Exactly. And that's where the role of the parent comes in. You know, we homeschool, and you said that you had said it opening up, that part of what you teach is that the classroom is not a great learning environment. And I discovered that simply by experience homeschooling our son. We homeschooled out of necessity because we traveled so much. You know, I told you about the 260 meetings in 22 states every year, which meant we spent about 4 days a month at home. We couldn't put him in any kind of traditional classroom. And what we discovered was that the world became his classroom, and he didn't put education in a box. So no matter where he is or what he's doing, he's learning, seeing and learning from it. I mean, we had history at the Alamo. We had science at the Johnson Space Center, you know, so learning, and your children learning outside of a box, which becomes the proverbial classroom, is such a valuable experience for any human being.
And so the struggle that I've identified now is that we've all been taught, and I'm taking notes as you talk also. I wrote down education of the government, by the government, and for the government.
Oh, absolutely.
And so we've been taught by the government that education looks, smells, and feels a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And so we think that that's what education is. And what you're saying is, well, I don't know, because we had history at the Alamo, and that was a pretty good education. And then we went to the Space Center and we learned all about space. And that counts as science of education, but it's much more visceral. It's much more understandable for a child, right? When they're up close and personal.
And it's much more, it's a lot easier to vet, you know, so you're not teaching children to learn and to believe whatever is fed to them in a book. They're able to touch and feel and see, and teaching in real life is really about critical thinking. The problem with the American education system, by design, mind you, is to teach children what to think and not teach them how to think. And then secondarily beneficial to the government is to teach them that all source of wisdom and truth comes from government, whoever that agent may be, the government teacher, the government politician, the government president, the government agency, the government media. And so it's all about source information and being able to engage in critical truth finding thinking.
So I got to take a break, but before I do, I want you to give the website so that people can find you online at least once before we go to break. And then when we come back from break, I want to talk about the Supreme Court nominees and some of these mandates that we've been seeing, the lockdowns, and then finally the truckers, because I do want to get into the truckers. So
Okay.
before we go to break, let people know where to find you.
Well, the dozens of classes that I teach are all available online at libertyfirstsociety.com. Libertyfirstsociety.com is where you become a member student with us. We teach middle school all the way through college. We have law school groups that use our classes to study because they know they're not getting the truth about the Constitution in law school. And you can also at libertyfirstsociety.com get all the podcasts that we do as well.
Okay, so libertyfirstsociety.com. We'll take a quick break and we'll be right back with KrisAnn Hall. Hi, this is Sam Sorbo. Kevin and I have discovered a great American company that supports our traditional values and the work we're doing to restore our culture from the lies of the left. Check out sorbo.nutramedix.com for great health wellness products like my favorite. They have a stress support kit, which I use every day. And I have to say, it really does help. So check it out at sorbo.nutramedix with an X, nutramedix.com. And don't forget to use the code Sorbo at checkout. Thanks for listening. Welcome back to the show. I'm Sam Sorbo with KrisAnn Hall from libertyfirstsociety.com, libertyfirstsociety.com, because liberty comes first and then all other things can follow. KrisAnn Hall is here and she teaches classes on the Constitution and on our rights and how to interpret some of our founding documents, for instance. But we've been talking about education. Now I want to branch into, because obviously we're on the very same page with education. I have nothing more to say to you about that. We have nothing else to talk about.
Yeah.
No, I want to talk to you about Supreme Court picks.
Right. Well, the problem that we have, again, goes back to education, Sam, because I had mentioned before the break that we stopped teaching the proper application of our Constitution in 1833. And so with Supreme Court justices for many, many decades, we've been using the wrong standard to vet them. And you listen, because it's coming up. And I challenge everybody to listen. Listen to the hearings. Everybody's going to be, and in the media, everybody's going to be talking about, we need a liberal justice. We need a conservative justice. I want to suggest to the people, we don't need a conservative justice any more than we need a liberal justice, because either way, that's an activist justice. What we need is a constitutional justice, and that is a very different vetting process. So problem number one with Supreme Court justice selection over the many decades past is that we have failed to vet the justices on the only standard that's really that's really relevant, and that's the Constitution. And then the secondary problem is how we go about selecting Supreme Court justices. And this follows with the federal justices as well. It is a two-pronged nomination process. The President of the United States does not appoint Supreme Court justices. The President of the or federal judges. The President of the United States nominates. It is a bifurcated process to be a check and balance, so that the senators then vet the candidates nominated by the president on their constitutionality, on whether they're going to be independent from political influence, or if they're going to exhibit what our Constitution calls bad behavior and be an activist judge. So when we talk about Supreme Court justice appointments, what we really need to understand is that the Senate is the appointing body of Supreme Court justices and federal judges, not the president. And to have senators that are willing to rubber stamp a presidential nomination simply in the name of tradition is a failure of that check and balance system, which has given us justices like Sotomayor, like Roberts, like Kagan, like even Ginsburg.
In fact, you'd say it's a failure of, it's an abdication of their duties. If they're just
Absolutely.
willing to rubber stamp. Now, but I'm going to push back, because I don't know that a conservative justice is necessarily an activist justice. And I think that that is, because I'm extremely partisan, I think that that is a labeling of the left in order to say, you think we're bad, the other side just as bad. And that's
Yeah.
why, for instance, they've redefined fascism as if it's right wing, and it's not. Of course, it's left wing. It's just another left wing ideology, along with communism, socialism, and Marxism. But they've labeled fascism, they call it right wing, so that they can say, well, the guys on the right, the far right, are just as bad as we are.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if, when I think of a conservative justice, I don't think of somebody who rules in the vein of conservatism all the time. I think of somebody who goes back to founding documents. And
well,
that
would be better definition of a constitutional justice.
Agreed, but I would also say that's a conservative justice, right?
Right, but even our conservative justices trade constitutional issues quite often. Justice Thomas has held against the right of the people in the Fourth Amendment quite often. Justice Scalia voted to expand governmental power through executive agencies, through the EPA. And so what we have to understand is that a conservative justice, although not as akin and not as often votes contrary to the Constitution, that conservative issues like power for security, power for safety, power for police, power for in protection of governmental agencies are considered conservative issues. And the justices will then set aside the Constitution in its application to limited government. And that's why I like Neil Gorsuch so much, because Neil Gorsuch is willing to even challenge those principles that have been established as precedent that conservative justices generally lean to, and say, no, we need to put the right of the people to be secure in their property against the Patriot Act, right? We got the Patriot Act from conservative justices and the indefinite detentions and stuff like that. So
fair enough. And I would say that Scalia was roundly considered our one, or not one, but our main constitutionalist. And yet you're saying he still found a little bit too far simply for the conservative viewpoint rather than the constitutional viewpoint.
Yes. And it's those precedents that are established that when we wiggle away from the standard of the Constitution, because the Constitution is really not complicated. Application of the Constitution is not complicated. But when we allow the justices to interpret new meanings into them to justify this action or justify that action, for whatever reason, then we start down a road of precedent that actually creates problems. One of the things that I had mentioned with Scalia had to do with the EPA. His majority opinion said that the EPA has the authority to define carbon credits and has the authority to define certain meanings of words. And through that, the EPA has expanded their power. I don't believe Justice Scalia intended for the EPA to do that, but it's those deviations from the standard that create problems.
Yeah, unfortunately, when you start messing with the rules and sort of realigning the rules, the whole game goes askew.
That's exactly right.
It's interesting. I mean, of course, I was a big fan of Scalia. I was not aware of that. I don't make a a habit of studying up on all of the rulings that have, although I will say, we studied the Dred Scott decision,
Mhm.
and I would encourage people to go and just read Taney's argument in the Dred Scott decision, because it is phenomenally flawed.
Oh yeah,
And
it's activism in its prime. And what it has done, unfortunately, is fueled the whole
right,
CRT argument that the Constitution labeled men as property. And I have to go back and I have to teach people it wasn't the Constitution that labeled men as property. It was a Supreme Court justice who said he had the authority to redefine the meanings in the Constitution that said the Constitution defined men as property. And so again, it's those things. And I'll say I love Scalia. He was a fabulous conservative justice, but we have to be, it's that critical thinking thing, Sam. We have to be in the habit of really being critical thinkers, even when it comes to people that we like.
and I agree. We also have to engage in thought, which is hard. And we've been taught in our schools that
Right.
thinking is hard and not to bother because we will tell you what to think. And so we're all stuck. Not all of us, but there's sort of a barrier to entry. There's that inertia that we have to overcome to
Right.
go there and to really think it through. And by the way, Scalia made some really fine decisions also.
Absolutely.
Everybody makes mistakes. Nobody's perfect and all of that. But yeah, including the Supreme Court, not perfect. And I just hold up Dred Scott as my, prime example. And I don't even have to go to the abortion ruling, but we can start with Dred Scott and go from there.
Sam, that's a really important realization to verbalize, as you just put it, that the Supreme Court is not perfect. And this is one of the reasons why we need to stop elevating the Supreme Court to
Agreed.
a position of authority that doesn't constitutionally exist.
They also
Supreme
don't make
Court does
law.
not make law.
There you
Roe v.
go. I
Wade
just
is not
said
the
that.
law of the land. It's a Supreme Court opinion.
That's right.
And so what we're really talking about here, Sam, is as a people, we need to make the choice to look at original documents, to look at the Constitution itself, and to really be willing to be made uncomfortable, to teach ourselves to think a little bit deeper.
Yeah, that's very well said, making ourselves uncomfortable. I just realized there's a weird correlation because the Supreme Court issues opinions.
Mhm.
They're not even judgments, they're opinions, right?
Right.
And well, they're also called rulings.
They're actually not. If you look at the documents, they are called opinions. We call them rulings erroneously.
Fascinating, because you're no longer entitled to your opinions if they disagree with whatever status quo, whatever I hold, right? And that's because opinions are laws.
Right.
Like we've conflated these words and confounded ourselves. And so
Absolutely.
now you're not allowed to hold your own opinions because
Right.
they're dangerous somehow.
That's a really great connection. I love those little connections of how the psychology of the mind works and how words dictate how we live. Words have meaning, and the way we think actually dictates how we behave.
Absolutely.
And that's what the experimental psychologists that created the school systems actually know.
That's right. And our words are our thoughts. So once they control the words, which is what that's what my book is about, Words for Warriors.
Yeah.
Once they control the words, you won't be even allowed to think the things that you want to think. And of course, the reason that we have the First Amendment is not so that you can say things, it's so that you can think things. I mean, also so that you can say things. Just briefly, because we're running out of time and I'm not going to get to the truckers and stuff. I want to ask you about the Article 5 convention. Mm-hmm. Do you have any overview thoughts on that?
Well, I have written one of the books, I've written 6 books. One of the books that I've written is called Sovereign Duty. And Sovereign Duty has a whole chapter on Article 5. Article 5 is the section in the Constitution that explains how the US Constitution is to be amended. And in that chapter of Sovereign Duty, I explain, not from my opinion. As a matter of fact, I work really hard not to teach my opinions because, again, I don't believe opinions are law. I believe that everybody's entitled to them, but we shouldn't be learning from opinions. We should be learning from facts. And the real facts on the Constitution come from those who wrote the Constitution and those who ratified the Constitution. And so I bring in the explanation of why Article 5 is there. And even from James Madison, who is historically referred to as the father of the Constitution, he had some really great concerns about holding a convention in the future to amend the Constitution. And so what I put forward in Article 5, in the chapter on Article 5, are James Madison's concerns about a convention to amend the Constitution in the future, and also juxtaposition Madison's concerns. What has our Congress written over the last 100 years about how they believe their role plays out in amending the Constitution? It's stunning when you see 100 years of congressional hearings and congressional experts talk about the Congress's role in amending the Constitution according to Article 5, and you put that right next to James Madison's concerns about a future convention. It's absolutely stunning, the insight that Madison had. Now, I am not opposed to amending the Constitution because I know why that process was placed in there. Our founders wanted us to have a way to amend the Constitution without war. So we have to know why the Constitution has a way to amend it, the seriousness of amending that Constitution, and when not to apply those terms.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of sum it up like this. They're not following the Constitution now. What makes you think that changing it will make it better?
Well, and the changes that I've seen proposed, yeah, the changes that I've seen proposed are so superficial, they wouldn't really do anything anyway.
Yeah, I feel like it could be a Trojan horse, right? Oh, we only want to do this, this, and this. And then they all of a sudden, and by the way, no Second Amendment, that's gone.
Well, that's exactly right. Have you seen the book written by former Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens on amending the Constitution? He actually proposes an amendment that would change the Second Amendment to apply only to people who work for government.
Yeah, that's a plan for prosperity right there.
Yeah.
Why I'm sad that people are so ignorant of these things, KrisAnn, but what you are doing is so fantastic. And I really encourage people, by the way, isn't she great to listen to? So go to, shoot, I wrote it down here. Where is it? libertyfirstsociety.com, libertyfirstsociety.com, to get her classes, to listen to her, to find out where she's speaking near you so you can go see her in person. She's a very dynamic speaker. They do a great presentation, and you'll be blessed by it, because these are important things that you need to know. And just because your government told you that they were boring and uninteresting and not important means that they're exactly the opposite of all those things. And so you should definitely engage KrisAnn Hall. Go to libertyfirstsociety.com. This is the Sam Sorbo Show.